So good afternoon, distinguished delegates, dear colleagues, participants following us, attending in person here or following us online, and welcome to our session of today, Beating the Rising Heat, Cool Solutions for Resilient Communities. My name is Giorgia Rambelli. I'm the coordinator for climate policy and energy governance at the European Secretariat of ICLE, Local Government for Sustainability, and it will be my great pleasure to moderate the discussion today. The session of today is organized by the United Nations Environment Programme in partnership with C40 Cities, the Cool Coalition, the Global Alliance for Building and Construction, of which I'm a proud member of the steering committee. You probably have noticed, but I would like to remind you already from now that the interpretation will be available in English and in Arabic. So this session of today is organized in the framework of the first ever edition of the Middle East and North Africa Climate Week, and is part of the program in the track that is focusing on transformation opportunities for climate action. And sustainable cooling solutions represent indeed a key opportunity to support our community resilience, both in adapting, but also in driving innovation forward. The Middle East and North Africa region is already the hottest and the driest on the planet, and the science is clear. If we don't drastically cut our emissions and swiftly implement adaptation measures and nature-based solutions, with the rising temperature, part of the regions may become inhabitable. Cities will be most impacted by the rising heat. Maximum temperatures are estimated to reach or even exceed 60 degrees Celsius in the MENA region. Urban centers, of course, will be suffering even more in looking into what megacities have, for example, to deal with as a challenge around the heat island effect. And there will be more and more of these challenges that will affect not only the communities at large, but in particular the most vulnerable part of these communities. In the Middle East, most of the capital cities could face at least 4 months of very hot days, exceeding tolerable temperature every year. So cooling will become a growing need. And with it, our demand, not only for cooling, but also in terms of increase of energy consumption and energy demand, will also grow. And with that, also emissions. So to avoid to be locked into a potential vicious cycle, which could be affecting our citizens, our communities across the board, we need to not only identify, but also to roll out and to scale up as much as possible sustainable cooling solutions. So the good news is that cities and local governments are not only deeply aware of these different challenges, but they are also ready to engage and actually have been doing so for a while. They have been delivering a number of sustainable solutions. They are building green infrastructure. They are building comprehensive urban approaches, for example, to promote natural ventilation. They are implementing district cooling solutions and tapping into the potential of renewable energy. They are implementing passive and nature-based solution, and they are using sustainable materials to cope with the heat. So with this different consideration as a backdrop, today's session aims to discuss a number of questions. How do we ensure access to cooling, sustainable cooling for all, without multiplying the negative impacts on mechanical cooling? What solutions are already being implemented? How can we accelerate them? How can we accelerate their adoption to transform our built environment in a way that we can be keeping cool, but also do so in a very sustainable manner? How can we work together across sectors, across level of government, and across all parts of our society to accelerate this action? And how can we leverage city-to-city cooperation, peer learning, and networks like C40 Cities, ICLE to allow to learn from each other and to be inspired by each other? And finally, how can we leverage coalitions such as the UNEP-led Cool Coalition and, of course, the Global Alliance for Building and Construction in bringing together all these different stakeholders that have a key role to play across government, across industry, academia, so that we can galvanize this action, deliver not only pilots, but large-scale implementation and best practices for the uptake of a holistic and cross-sectoral approach to beat the rising heat. So to answer all of these different questions and to further this very important conversation, I will be joined today by an excellent lineup of speakers who will share their knowledge, their insight, and of course also their experiences on sustainable cooling solution to extreme heat for the MENA region. So now to get us started, it is my utmost pleasure to introduce to you the first speaker of today, delivering our keynote and getting us started in our conversation. Mr. Abdullah Taiba is a senior advisor for the CEO of the Royal Commission of Riyadh City, Saudi Arabia, and he's speaking on behalf of His Excellency Fat Al-Rashid, the CEO of the Royal Commission for Riyadh City, Saudi Arabia. The floor is yours, Mr. Taiba.
Good afternoon to you all.
مساكم الله جميعا بالخير. الضيوف الكرام، السيدات والسادة، نيابة عن سعادة فهد رشيد وهو المدير التنفيذي لمبادرة مدينة الرياض، دعوني أنقل أهنئ الإمارات العربية المتحدة والأمم المتحدة على تنظيم هذا المؤتمر
happening now, and it's becoming a regional focus. And thank you for the opportunity by adding Riyadh to the call for action in tackling the challenge posed by extreme heat in urban environments. The modern challenge is twofold. First, it threatens livability. And second, it inhibits growth needed in our cities, specifically in our region. Extreme heat will affect more than 3.5 billion people by 2070. 1.6 billion of whom will live in urban cities. Extreme heat kills more people globally than all other climate-related hazards combined. Believe it or not, in 2020, extreme heat killed 20 times more people than hurricane in the USA. Yet most people are unaware of extreme heat deadliest impact, since it is not visually shocking as hurricanes, floods, or forests. Our cities are engines of growth and opportunity. The whole world is looking at our achievements and the competitiveness of our cities as the growth of our nation accelerate. This also brings us to raising dependence on air conditioning for homes, offices, schools, hospitals, and every new glass building facade, every kilometer of black asphalt, and every poorly designed cooling system contributes to the heat. As we all know, urban heat effects follow population concentration and are dramatically increased by low albedo materials, population concentration, increased use of air conditioning, the destruction of trees, urban building, wind blocking, and air pollution. All of those are a result of human behavior. Today, almost 70% of the energy we produce in our region is utilized for urban cooling. And as we know, the Gulf is experiencing higher level of warming than the rest of the world, to the point that for every 1 degree centigrade in average global temperature rise, we'll see a 3 degrees centigrade increase here in the Gulf. Research shows that traffic can contribute to an average increase of up to 7 degrees. Asphalt in hot climate could become as high as 50 degrees hotter than the ambient temperature, which transfers to environment potentially contributing up to 3 additional degrees centigrade. Air conditioning accounts for 1 to 4 degrees increase, and a lack of greenery and urban shade surface can add another 4 degrees centigrade. As we continue to urbanize, we must consider creating a holistic approach, as mentioned previously, to combat urban heat that considers the root cause individually to each city. In this post-pandemic era, it is now more important than ever to act and to work together in finding innovative solutions that addresses the long-term challenge of climate change. If we continue with business as usual, the Gulf and the world at large will soon be faced with extreme weather conditions that will disrupt societal norms and test the limits of human survivability. In this region in specific, urban heat mitigation is more than a priority. It's a duty for our people and for our planet. In this region, sustainability is not just a fashionable slogan. It is an urgent necessity. Today, cooperation is required through collective efforts to address environmental issues, and the city of Riyadh is advancing synergies between adaptation and urban mitigation efforts in tackling climate change, protecting the environment with concrete actions, promoting smarter cooling systems and affordable energy solutions. Not only to enable opportunities, but to develop systematic approaches that effectively address climate change, ensuring our economic ambition do not come at the cost of the environment. So it's a very difficult balance, actually. It's a global challenge. While the problem is felt most intensely in our cities, it is also in our cities where potential solutions are emerging. And increasingly, the rest of the world is leading from the solution we are pioneering right here. At the city level, we have begun deploying an integrated sustainable urban development approach, an approach that harmonizes the entire value chain from research and design to material and final products. We must create an energy efficient system that integrates seamlessly for a single objective to combat urban heat. Before opting for district cooling, it's important to consider applying passive solutions to reduce urban heat. Traditional architecture from our region provide great insight into sustainable building and urbanism. For centuries before the invention of mechanical cooling, settlements were constructed to maximize shade in the paths between them and to benefit from cross-ventilation while upholding the deepest human values of an inclusive community. Walls of traditional materials kept heat at bay long into the day, and features that channeled the available breeze lower temperature inside. In recent decades, leaders including King Salman, the custodian of the two holy mosques, when he was a governor of Riyadh, promoted a revival of these traditional ways of building and of living. That's called Salmani design. Salmani design influences can be seen in developments around Riyadh even today. Architectural and urban systems leveraging traditional style were chosen to make communities socially, culturally, and economically, as well as environmentally sustainable. Salmani architecture contributes to Saudi Vision 2030 and continues to inspire new developments in Riyadh as we seek solutions to combat urban heat. A new generation of developments combine the past practices of the past with present-day design to reduce albedo effects, increase energy efficiency, minimize heat gain, and incorporate green spaces through the city. As part of our city's 2030 development plan, the Green Riyadh initiative is helping bring back the concept of oasis living. And we are creating a massive green space on brownfield, including an urban park 4 times larger than Central Park in New York. That's called King Salman Park. We're also planting 7.5 million trees. We are 7.5 million people in Riyadh, so we're talking about 1 tree per capita. And this is going to increase further. And we are fostering mixed-use development and urban planning, implementing transport-oriented development guidelines using smart mobility solutions. And we will soon launch the world's largest single-phase integrated public transport system that will remove hundreds of thousands of cars from the Riyadh road. All of these measures will combat urban heat by increasing albedo, providing shade, helping to regenerate soil, absorb carbon, and improve air quality. And it is expected to reduce ambient temperature by up to 2 to 4 degrees centigrade, with that effect increasing up to 10 degrees centigrade in the shade. Using sustainable materials, that was mentioned before as well, is also important, and there are innovative solutions being developed by Saudi architects and research centers leveraging on the traditional building material and techniques. Environmental retrofitting and integrated solutions for advanced thermal insulation and being considered as part of the future urban plans. For example, we are now using specialized sheets and more efficient insulation material made by SABIC to save cooling and lighting costs. While we are tackling these steps to address the challenges arising out of climate change and urban heat in Riyadh, we are planning to bring together academia, think tanks, industry, and investors to engage on systematic solutions and pioneer future urban cooling solutions and other climate technology. This will both accelerate the development of climate technologies and create a variety of green economy jobs for our residents. As those responsible for our cities, we must embrace our responsibility to lead on these issues. We must ensure that city governance evolves to integrate best practices and apply them. Among the best practices we are studying, several are those identified by the Adrien Arsht Rockefeller Foundation Resilience Center. Mention some of them. 1, design and implement a heat action plan and develop an urban heat data framework. 2, create the office of the Chief Heat Officer. 3, develop a heat health policy toolkit to assist city officials with hands-on mechanism to address extreme heat on the ground. And finally, implement a heat wave naming and ranking system, similar to the ones used for hurricanes. The cities for Seville in Spain and Athens in Greece are already working on this. We are very eager to collaborate with other cities in the region and beyond to exchange knowledge. The city of Riyadh looks forward to engaging with each one of you to collaborate, share, and gain knowledge and experience. Thank you very much for the opportunity to address you, and I look forward for a fruitful discussion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Taiba, for your contribution. And it's really great to hear about the efforts of the city of Riyadh, of course, and about the CEO's leadership in driving sustainable solution to extreme heat. I also want to thank you very much for reminding us of the human cost that, of course, are connected to these heat waves, as well as to the important role the cities and city governments have when it comes to delivering solutions that are both learn from the past, but also forward-looking into innovation and into the future. So I would now like to introduce to you the other components of our esteemed panel. I promise you that we have a great lineup, and indeed we do. So it's my great pleasure to introduce to you Mr. Hamad bin Shafa. He's the Chief Executive Officer of Empower. I'm also happy to introduce to you Helias Essabai, who will be connecting online and speaking on behalf of Majida El-Hawardini. She's the Secretary General of Housing and City Policy Department for the Ministry of National and Territory Planning, Land Planning, Housing and City Policy of the Kingdom of Morocco. I'm also joined by Abdullah Taiba, as you just heard, and thank you very much for staying with us on the panel, of course. We are also joined by Sousohan Bawaresh. She's the Clean Energy and Climate Specialist of the Royal Jordan Scientific Society. Welcome, and thank you for being with us. I'm also joined by Omnia El Amrani, Youth Climate Representative from Egypt. And then finally, I'm also joined by Gareth Phillips. He's the head of Climate and Environmental Finance Division of the African Development Bank Group. Thank you very much for being with us, Gareth. And then last but no means the least, also joining us online, Shruti Nayaran. She is the Regional Director for South and West Asia at C40 Cities. So as you can hear, we have a lot of voices and a lot of great contributors that we will be discussing with today. And I would really like to begin, maybe starting with a question to Mr. Hamad bin Shafa. So the Middle East and North Africa is already the hottest and the driest region on the planet, but climate change could make some of the areas uninhabitable, as we heard before. Could you give us some insights on how district energy solutions, like the ones that Empower is developing, can help cities in reducing temperature in a sustainable way?
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. It's my pleasure to be here with you on this event. It's very important to know that the district cooling or the air conditioning system on this part of the world, it's not luxury, it's a necessity. Without air conditioning, we would not be able to sit in this room. Without air conditioning, we would not be able to walk in the malls, in the hospital, the school. So we have started it 19 years ago when I established Empower. The district cooling was just a concept. It started in the city of Dubai and it was ramping up rapidly. Today in the UAE, we have more than 3 million tons. It's considered the largest in the world by far. We also adopt the concept. We have transformed the air conditioning system to become utility rather than it's become only individual solution. The district cooling is a simple concept to build an air conditioning plant room connected to different type of building, whether it's commercial, residential, shopping mall, hospital, from one space. And that diversified give us also that we can serve very efficient service, very optimized, and we give the customer their needs. To look at it, yes, we have noticed that the CO2 and the climate, that the temperature is by 4%, but if we did not look at the city by itself, and we focus and we put it as a Dubai integrated strategy 2030, Dubai now reach 23% of the cooling in the city by the district cooling. We left all the traditional way of air condition, whether window type or split ducts, or the air-cooled chiller were transformed to water-cooled chillers. We have target by 2030, by 2030 to reach 40% of the city served by district cooling, and this is a big number. If you just want to know, I can give you the number of my company. We are having around 1.8 million ton. For your information, United States of America, Canada, and Mexico, they are getting around 850,000 ton. So you would imagine what's the size of what we're having here. For example, one of the projects that we are serving is Jumeirah Palm, and this hotel is getting our service. I don't know, it's not cool today, but maybe it's not us, it's them. So the district cooling or the air conditioning system in this part of the world, it has to be spread all over. We know that there is some market has been developed like Qatar, Oman, Saudi Arabia, and Bahrain, and Kuwait. They are developed in the concept of district cooling. Yes, it's starting to revamp big in Saudi Arabia with all the new mega projects coming up, whether in Najum, in Riyadh, in Jeddah, in Bahrain. All these projects are important to become all the new projects. People now, with all the globalization, that they understand that the district cooling, it's a concept, has to be spread. So it's people cannot rely on the old conventional system, whereas they lost efficiency on it. For example, the traditional system is consumed for each refrigeration ton around 2.2 kilowatt. With the district cooling, it's 0.9. We're saving 50% of their bill. Plus, it's saving 50% on the end user. This is very important. And the cities is always looking at the new generation. We're always looking at this one. For example, as all of you know, that on the Middle East and the Arabian Peninsula, the most precious things that we have is the water. I was just telling my colleagues one of the incidents with King Faisal. So we adopt a new technology. Rather than using the portable water, we try to preserve it to the new generation. And we start using the treated sewage effluent, which is the gray water, to replace it rather than use it for the air conditioning system. We build also the thermal storage tank. What's the thermal storage tank? We restore the chilled water during the night time because the demand on air conditioning gets reduced, and we discharge it on the daytime when we go to the peak hours. This is two of the items that we have worked on, and I think on the future, the district cooling or the air conditioning system, it has to be spread more often in all cities.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your answer and also for your leadership. And of course, we will have the opportunity to hear more, of course, about the great work that you are doing and the Empower is doing. I think it's very interesting. Again, this idea of these integrated approaches that you are looking into, it's something that definitely will be part of our core discussion because, as you are saying very rightly, cooling is not an optional measure. It's something that should be widespread and mainstream into the way that we implement climate action. So thank you very much for that. I would like now to connect online and to go to our speaker, Ilyas Sabai. I mentioned already before that he will be speaking on behalf of Madam Secretary General Majida El-Wardini. Just checking if we are ready for the connection.
Yes, I can hear you.
Hello, we can hear you. Thank you very much for being with us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. As you mentioned, I'm speaking today on behalf of Madam Majida El-Wardini, who unfortunately was not able to join. So apologies. It's with great pleasure that I am participating today in this session titled Tackling the Heat Rise, Cooling Solutions for Resilient Communities. I would like to thank the organizers, the United Arab Emirates, UNEP, C40 Cities, the Cool Coalition, and the Global ABC for inviting us to this event, which aims to share experiences and best practices of MENA countries in low carbon transition and in particular policies to combat global warming and rising temperatures. As announced by the IPCC's latest IPCC report published in February 2022, the risks of climate change for cities and infrastructure will increase considerably in the medium and long term. According to this report, in addition to repeated intense heat events, urban housing would increasingly experience other climate impacts such as flooding, fire, and wind that will likely have adverse effects on the housing stock, as well as on the occupants exposed to these risks. In Morocco, for instance, and as in other MENA countries, these phenomena are already being observed and are making our cities, buildings, and infrastructure very vulnerable to the effects of climate change. Faced with those risks, the building sector is called upon to undertake a major transformation in order to massively reduce greenhouse gas emissions along the life cycle of the act of building while strengthening its resilience to the impacts of climate change. In this sense, the Kingdom of Morocco is committed under the enlightened leadership of His Majesty the King Mohammed VI, may God assist him, to make sustainable development a true societal project. This commitment has been translated into successive reforms and ambitious national programs and plans that are in line with the various global agendas for sustainable development. The Kingdom of Morocco adopted its national strategy for sustainable development in 2017, which devotes an important component to the fight against the effects of climate change, and submitted its first nationally determined contribution in 2016 and its updated NDC in 2021, which reflects the country's vision to make its territories more resilient to climate change and ensure a rapid transition to a low-carbon economy. Morocco's overall updated target represents 45.5% in GHG emissions by 2030, including an unconditional target of 18% compared to the baseline scenario. And the building sector has 6% share of this global mitigation effort. In addition, Kingdom of Morocco has just put in place its new development model, a development model designed within the framework of an inclusive and participatory approach that constitutes a new national ambition for 2035, The orientations of this new development model consider as fundamental issue the resilience and sustainability of territories and the access to a decent and sustainable living environment. As for your question about the transition and resilience against global warming, the Kingdom of Morocco has undertaken, for the building sector, the Kingdom of Morocco has undertaken several efforts and initiatives to achieve the low carbon transition of the sector. We have worked to activate the necessary levers in terms of regulation, standardization, and collaboration between professionals to enable the low carbon transition of the sector. In this sense, I will mention few initiatives that are actively contributing today to ensure low carbon transition of the sector. The first is the adoption in 2015 of the thermal regulation of buildings in Morocco, which aims to reduce heating and cooling needs, improve thermal comfort, and reduce greenhouse gas emission in buildings. Then we have the development of MEPS, minimum energy performance standards, for two energy-intensive equipment in the building sector, namely the refrigerators and air conditioners. Also, the opening of the low voltage renewable energy market to encourage the development of solar photovoltaic roofs, and the creation of the Moroccan Building Alliance for Climate, which federates the efforts of all the stakeholders of the sector on a national scale and which constitutes a framework of partnership and convergence of the actions of professionals. And then the integration of dimension of adaptation to climate change as an essential component of the low carbon transition of the building sector. As for the role of platforms like Global ABC in supporting decarbonization efforts in building sector, I would say that a platform like Global ABC play a very important role in supporting the sector's decarbonization and adaptation efforts to meet the climate goals of the Paris Agreement. For example, the Global ABC flagship publications such as Global Roadmap, Global Status Report, or Regional Roadmaps support efforts to develop climate-friendly policies and actions in the sector. These documents provide a clear overview of the key processes required to decarbonize the sector and provide an overview of the current states of policy implementation in the building sector by providing answers to two major questions. How can we complement and reinforce our actions already implemented or being implemented, and what is needed for areas not yet covered by the regulatory and institutional framework on the national level? And not to mention also the work of the Global ABC to support the creation of national alliances as platform for the convergence of actions carried out by various actors in the value chain of the building sector, or to support the processes of developing national roadmaps for decarbonization of building sector in some countries. That is of great importance.
Thank you so much for the great intervention and for sharing all of these amazing examples and these exceptional steps that Morocco is taking, both in line with national policy and align our national policy with, of course, our common shared goals to deliver on the Paris Agreement. Thank you for your contribution, and of course, our regards to Madam Secretary General as well. I would now like to go back to our in-person panel, and maybe I would like to ask a question to Ms. Sousan Bawaresh. So, Sousan, due to the hot and very arid climate that you have in Jordan, of course, the country is facing considerable cooling challenges. We can expect, of course, that with that, I mentioned it earlier, energy demand will also be increasing for cooling purposes in the coming decades. So what are the impacts that you can see on energy demand, but also on energy security? And how is Jordan taking action to catalyze action towards a more sustainable cooling approaches?
Good afternoon. I'm delighted to have this opportunity to be with you in this session. Actually, Jordan faces several challenges due to its need to import most of its energy needs. And as you said, aridity and increase in temperature make air conditioning a must and a need, not just a luxury. Actually, in 2015, the government launched the National Vision and Strategy 2025, This is a document that includes all development pathways in the country and provides holistic approach for social and economic framework to provide the equal opportunities for all. It includes around 400 policies. Some of them are related to climate, energy, and environment. Next step was in implementing the national vision. It was the National Green Growth Plan. This National Green Growth Plan targeted 6 sectors. One of them is energy. The Energy National Green Growth Plan, actually it was aligned with the National Vision and Strategy, with the National Green Growth Plan, and the National Determined Contribution under the Paris Agreement. The Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources in Jordan updated their strategy 2020 to 2030, targeting more energy efficiency. Actually, and also Jordan prepared the Jordan National Energy Action Plan. It was the first prepared in 2011, then the second in 2017, and currently the ministry is preparing the third one. And this, as you know, the National Energy Action Plan is very important in providing sectorial measures for energy efficiency and reducing the energy consumption. Another thing is that we have also the Ministry of Environment, because when we talk about sustainable cooling, we talk about energy efficiency in addition to the type of refrigerant. So the Ministry of Environment ratified, was the first country in the region to ratify the Kigali Amendment in 2019. And they have a successful journey in complying with international commitments, starting from the CFCs, then the HFCs, and currently the HFCs. And to comply with the Kigali Amendment and Montreal Protocol. And this is the responsibility of the National Ozone Unit, and they are doing great. Another thing that the Jordan government is trying their best to provide financial incentives. So you can find that there are tax exemptions for air conditioning if you prove that it is of high energy efficiency class, so you can take exemptions. So this in order to encourage the development in the market and introducing more energy efficient appliances. Also, just for Jordan Standard and Metrology Organization, we had the twinning project with the EU, and they achieved excellent journey also in adopting technical regulations for eco-design and energy labeling. And by this, since 2014, you can find only inverter technology for split units in Jordan. No conventional types are, if you go to the market, you can't find conventional types.
Thank you.
Okay, and as you know, this is up to 40% reduction in energy consumption, and this people find it really useful and decreasing the energy consumption. As you know, many people can't afford the high energy electricity cost in Jordan. In addition to this, the building codes, we have the Jordan National Building Council. It is under the Jordan Ministry of Public Works and Housing. They are responsible for building codes. So you can see we can find thermal insulation code, air conditioning code, central heating code, energy efficiency building guide, and energy efficiency building code. So all these efforts towards proper design for buildings and construction. Another thing now, which is very important to talk about Cool Up program. The Royal Scientific Society is implementing now upscaling sustainable cooling Cool Up program. This program is funded by BMU, under EKI initiative, and it's led by Guidehouse. We are a consortium of 10 partners, and it's a regional project of 6 years, duration of 6 years. We are proud of this partnership. We are addressing sustainable cooling, looking again at energy efficiency and natural refrigerants. And we have 3 pillars. The 3 pillars, it's finance, technology, and policies.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
I will stop you here because we need also to leave a little bit of suspense
Okay.
for the rest of the conversation.
Okay.
But we'll certainly come back to you to learn more about this specific program.
Okay.
But we talked at length now about the amazing work that is being done, of course, in Jordan, and focusing on energy measures in particular, but also cleaner options. And I think also the importance of building codes and standards came very strongly across in your presentation. Now, maybe I would like to go back shortly to Mr. Taiba once again. And we talked about, as I mentioned, this more energy-related type of solution and this mitigation-related type of solution. Can you tell us a little bit about how we are using nature? You already kind of hinted at it, but how are you using nature in the city of Riyadh? What type of efforts are on the way to make the city cooler, to mitigate emissions, of course, from cooling and increase the resilience through utilizing nature-based solutions?
Thank you. How much time do I have?
Well, it depends. You have a little bit now and maybe a little bit later.
Okay. But okay, very quickly. I would like really to look at issues from a holistic approach. So it's not fair to the subject to just to look at only the issue of heating. We have to look at the whole thing from sources, causes, demand. I'm speaking from a city point of view. So if I want to control this, I cannot just talk about cooling. Anyway, this will be an approach. The second area that I wanted to answer, actually before answering the question, is it's very important to focus on two things when we try to address this global issue. Number one is awareness. So awareness is extremely important to have each and every capita on this earth participate in solving this issue. So we're talking about awareness for public, for government, and from private sector. And we have just started this, in my view, very late. Second, very important point, which is technology. We know that the only way to solve these issues is using technology. And unfortunately, technology is there, brain is there, money is there. It's about the focus of the world. Just to give you an example, the solar industry, when we talked about the solar industry in the past 10 years, just before the 10 years, you find that nobody is focusing on that, and you have the prices of the solar is this much. It took only less than 10 years where the whole world focused on this, and it reduced by 10-folds the production and the manufacturing. Similarly, every other technology would act the same. So if we put our heads around this, we put the ecosystems for the technology, which means talent, R&D, piloting, SMEs, commercialization, industrialization, we will get to the very optimum solutions. Now, to answer your question very quickly, one thing I want to mention about how to use Riyadh nature to combat urban heat. We are in the middle of the desert, but alhamdulillah, we're blessed with some good natural resources. One of them is that we are surrounded by two big wadis, which is valleys. We call them Wadi Hanifa and Wadi Salay, and they are just hugging Riyadh like this from north to south. And these two valleys, alhamdulillah, we have been trying to rehabilitate those valleys in terms of watering them, in terms of planting on them, and this will create a very good sort of participation into reducing the temperature in Riyadh. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the examples and also for your reflections around technology and the importance really of also having access to it. So it seems like we have the technology, we have the willingness and the ingenuity at the city level to bring this solution forward, but the question remains very often on how do we bring them at scale. And when we talk about bringing them at scale, the first question that comes up is of course around resources. So I'm very happy now maybe to turn to Mr. Garrett Phillips here and to ask a little bit around the financing challenge that is being faced in order to bring these different policies, technologies that are available to the scale that we actually need to see them implemented, and what is the African Development Bank Group doing to support countries and cities that are willing to act on cooling solutions?
Great, thank you very much indeed, and thank you for inviting me to this afternoon's panel. So let me just touch briefly on some aspects. We've heard about the mitigation and the greenhouse gas emissions associated with that. So of course, if we can do more renewable energy, then we can address the greenhouse gas emissions coming from the use of fossil fuels and from the use of cooling systems. So if we provide more renewable energy, then we reduce the scale of the problem in the first instance. And so the African Development Bank is doing a lot of work around promoting renewable energy. Almost all of our investments, I think for about the past 7 years now, have been in mostly renewable energy, just some specific examples of fossil fuel for backup and so on. So we're becoming much more focused on that, both on grid and, for example, the Ouazzazate investment in Morocco with the concentrated solar power and some storage facility there. And a lot of off-grid and mini-grid solutions as well, which are big enough to provide small-scale cooling, for individual households or institutions and so on, but not the scale of district heating that we've heard about. So I think that's a very important area around addressing the mitigation. The adaptation side of it gets less attention, and we tend not to think and be so aware about the need to adapt. And I was very interested from the first speaker in the keynote about the number of deaths that are caused from adaptation. And it makes me think also about the impact of, the number of deaths from rising heat. It makes me think about the impact of rising heat on biodiversity, because this we don't measure. We don't know how much of our biodiversity we are losing because of these extreme heat conditions. And that, I think, speaks very much to the importance of the nature-based solutions and reforesting areas, recreating natural environments so that we can look after our biodiversity, because that, after all, is the root of our ability to adapt to climate change. So the African Development Bank is doing a lot in the area of adaptation, for example, in the agricultural sector, deploying new technologies, including heat-tolerant varieties of grain and so on, incredibly important, and even more so now as we see global events unfolding and threatening the food chain, but also looking at securing cold chain and processing of food to ensure that we can increase its longevity, because as we see, I mean, we already know, sometimes 40–50% of the food chain is lost because it rots on the way to the market, and as temperature goes up, that gets more. We have had examples of aflatoxin poisoning from people storing groundnut using traditional techniques that are no longer working because the temperature and humidity is coming up. So we need to provide those cool chain solutions, cold storage and transport facilities to protect that food and avoid some of the challenges that are coming in terms of famine and nutrition, food security and so on. So this is another area where we're very active, and we have some big programs coming forward in the agricultural sector. Of course, irrigation, water use, closely linked to heat stress and so on. And so we've heard a bit about the policies and standards. I don't think we're doing very much on that, but we need to do a lot more. But let me come then quickly to finance. So, I mean, we have our traditional windows, the Africa Development Fund, which offers concessional loans to developing countries. I think only 1 or 2 countries in North Africa fall into that bracket. The rest access our ADB money, which is our commercial lending. So we, for example, we're supporting an equity investment into a cold chain supply actually in Kenya, not in North Africa, but nonetheless, it's the sort of thing that we would be very interested to do. But 2 other areas, we're also developing a mechanism called the Adaptation Benefits Mechanism, which is a system that would enable consumers in developed countries, or those who can afford to do so, to contribute towards the cost of adaptation. And cooling actually is a really nice example, because if you look at cooling as a service and supply chain cooling, for example, there are costs associated to doing that, which agricultural communities may not be able to afford to front up. You know, they can't get the revenues quickly enough to repay the loans. So they face a financial barrier. And the adaptation benefits mechanism is a way in which developed country consumers could contribute towards the costs of that those adaptation activities, those adaptation technologies to help communities become more resilient to climate change. And I think also I'd like to highlight the opportunities for ESG, environmental social governance investors and impact investors to also look at this, because I don't think that, particularly in the developed world, we are at all aware of how exposed our supply chains are to heat stress. You know, we see it from the floods, and there's a really good example a few years back when there were big floods in Thailand, and they knocked out all the computer chip industries, and everything ground to a halt because we couldn't get the computer chips because of the floods. People don't realize, but we are much, much closer to heat stress, causing factories to shut down. Look at garment factories, for example, where typically people work in very poor conditions. If they're not air conditioned and we get one of these heat waves, either people are going to die at their sewing machines or these factories are going to shut down, and it will impact upon the supply chain. And it's a great opportunity for ESG actors to say, I'm going to look at my supply chain and make it resilient, and in this case, resilient to heat waves and extremes of weather events. So I think, you know, there are ways that we can finance these activities, but we need to be creative and we need to raise awareness about it. Let me stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think your point around this shared effort for the health of our planet and the idea of contributing towards the cost through this adaptation benefit mechanism is essentially very important. And I also think what you were saying about all this type of unthought, perhaps systematically, at least not thought effect that we have across the value chain is very important. And I think increasingly, beside the return on investment, we talk more and more about the cost of inaction. And I think for heat, this is something that certainly would have a definite impact in terms if we don't act right now, there will be definitely not only economical, but also social consequences, which lead me maybe also to ask a question to our next panelist. So Omnia El Omrani, I wanted to ask you, we talked about a little bit the impact on the biodiversity was mentioned, the impact on our economy, but maybe looking into the impact on communities when it comes to heating and then heat waves and needs for further cooling. What type of impacts do you see in terms of heat stress, and how is this challenge not only impacting us now, but impacting future generations?
Can you hear? Okay, perfect. So yeah, first of all, thank you so much for having me, and I've learned so much from each and every speaker here in the panel. So I would like to share a bit of what I see on a daily basis, and then what the research shows when it comes to the impacts of heat. Whenever we're thinking about climate change, we always say that it's more than just an environmental issue, it's a human health issue. The most prominent health impact we always think about, it's either we think about air pollution and how it affects our lungs and leads to asthma, bronchitis, and so on. And the second most prominent impact is the impacts that are related to extreme weather temperatures, especially heat. So if we think about it physiologically, when the heat increases, this affects our blood vessels and leads to cardiovascular diseases, which leads to heat strokes. And this is what we see a lot. And at the same time, heat on itself, it decreases our productivity and it decreases our efficiency. So this brings me to what I see on a daily basis. I am a young medical doctor starting my first year of residency in Cairo in Egypt. I work every day in the emergency room and I see a diversity of patients. Many of the patients that I see, especially during the times of spring and summer, are patients who come presenting with heat stress, heat stroke, and many of them are either because of occupational injuries, because of where they work, whether in construction sites that are now present, especially that I work in the capital city. And seeing each and every patient suffering from that consequence and knowing that this is not because of something that a person is doing, it's because of the changing climate. And this is what's very important when it comes to talking about the impacts of climate change and the impacts of heat, is bringing in real life stories that bring in the impact closer to home. And this also brings the urgency in investing in all of the sustainable solutions that are being presented right now. In terms of the social consequences, and I want to give an example about my country, Egypt. So the WHO predicted that from 2016, and they recorded that, actually it was the Lancet Countdown Report on Health and Climate Change. They measured the number of heat waves and the number of days within the heat waves, and they saw that from 2016 to 2020, Egypt on its own had 44 million more days of heat. And at the same time, the WHO predicted that, and they say, and it's important to know that heat also affects more either children or elderly aged above 65. And this is one of the social confounding factors that multiplies the effect of heat on human health. And the WHO predicted that per 100,000 person, around 65 elderly are going to die because of extreme weather temperature if we do not do anything about it. If adaptation solutions are implemented and we adapt more to the heat waves, this number was going to reduce to less than 6. So this brings the importance of acting now, especially that now we have the solutions and now there are more opportunities to invest in such solutions. What we bring in as a younger generation is the urgency, because we are now going to be the future adults and the future aged above 65 who are going to suffer more and more from the consequences. This is not just about us as a younger generation, this is also about the future generations, about our children and so on, who are going to suffer the consequences if we do not act with the same urgency on extreme weather events such as heat. And we have seen last year that governments, investors, and different stakeholders are able to act fast when there is a health threat, which was COVID-19. Heat is also a threat to our health. Climate change is a threat to our health. It is the biggest health threat of the 21st century. So it just makes common sense to act on and to invest in and prioritize the sustainable solutions. And this is not just on governments or on civil society or on youth groups to call on the urgency and the quick implementation of such solutions. This is a multidisciplinary process that needs collaboration. As a young person, part of different youth groups, it is my responsibility to speak about the consequences and to say that this is my future and I do not want to see these health impacts. I want the solutions to be implemented. I cannot do it on myself. We need to work together. As young people, we are able to support either through our own work, if we are working in different disciplines, if it's engineering, if it's air conditioning and so on, or if it's policy making, or if it's health. And as a doctor, I may be far apart from this field, but I'm able to communicate that it's urgent to act on it because it's impacting the health of my patients, it's impacting the health of my community. So I hope this answers your question.
It does very much. Thank you for your contribution and for sharing also your very vivid experience of what you see in your hospital on a day-to-day basis. The heat is certainly something that everyone can relate to. So definitely important to remind ourselves not only how we can suffer from it, but also how much more it affects the most vulnerable part of our societies. And this is something that, of course, who works with cities and who works with mayor knows very well. Our mayors, of course, across the world are the ones that see this type of impact on the community that they serve. And it's a pleasure now maybe to give the floor to our last speaker of the day. And I would like to ask Shruti Narayan, connecting with us virtually. You've been working as part of C40 Cities, of course, for 15 years with different mayors with different cities, and you know how much they have been enacting and trying to accelerate policy when it comes to climate action, also an international agenda. So from your experience, from what you have seen being implemented, could you share with us some challenges that are still remaining? And could you share with us some ideas on what are the most important goals that our cities are now to be facing to implement these solutions?
Thank you so much, actually. And, you know, the pleasure of going last is that pretty much everything gets covered. So there is not much to speak, you know, and having been on such an interesting panel with such diverse views. But just to kind of, you know, supplement on whatever has been discussed, you know, heat is probably one of the most, you know, visible indicator and the immediate indicator of climate change. You know, I think the way we are facing growing accelerating heat, and that's rendering, day-to-day sort of impossible, already, is reflecting on how we are facing climate change. And it's important for us to really approach it from a data-driven, approach. At C40, the way we work with mayors is to develop and structure very data-driven approach on structuring climate action plan, because heat is sort of a cross-sectoral outcome, right? It's not just one thing. And we heard from different, panelists talking about different aspects that actually contribute to heat. So I think it's very critical, to look at, how a cross-sectoral approach can deliver, solutions to mitigating and adapting to heat. So some of the solutions that our cities have, addressed in the region are, looking at, of course, embedding, solutions in urban environments. That is also looked in from a planning perspective, the kind of, solutions of surface treatment that are looked at. That's critical. The way the buildings function, incorporation of passive cooling measures so that we can reduce the energy consumption as much as possible. And then looking at, how one can incorporate renewable energy, and also then looking at active, sustainable means of cooling, right? So that's one aspect. Then, looking at which we, there were several discussions around nature-based solutions, and increasing nature in general in cities is very, very important. There is direct correlated, studies that have demonstrated how, increase of, nature or green cover can impact and provide solutions, not only physically, but also, from a mental perspective, that's been very helpful. And the way we look at it is there are immediate requirements to address heat. We have seen that some of our cities like Dubai, has come up with health and safety guidelines. So when you are facing a heat stress and heat wave, how do you communicate that to cities, right, to your citizens? So you need to have these structures in place, and just before me, a doctor was talking about heat stress, right? I mean, is there a possibility when you're facing this heat stress to be able to give guidelines for citizens on how to function and what to do, right? Because there has to be an immediate way of addressing that and a long-term way of doing that. So, we're seeing that, it's important to have, health and safety guidelines, to looking at, possible ways of incorporating this in your land use planning, developing very data-driven climate action plans that address all sectors, including energy, buildings, transportation, and how that can come together to deliver efficiency on ground that can help in, reducing the generation of heat. The challenge that we are facing is, obviously we are running out of time, right? Cities are feeling the heat now. Climate change is real, and we need to take action now. So I think it's important to start seeing how we can create, studies and, empower organizations and delivery mechanisms to immediately deliver. And that also ties to financial instruments, right? How can we mobilize and create financial instruments that can deliver some of these solutions on ground at scale? Also looking at new technologies, right? What could be mechanisms of developing and delivering new technologies that can really impact, and have a way of addressing what we are looking at. The other important critical thing, and that's challenge, and I think it's been talked about, how do we really address the vulnerable population, right? Children, adults, people who, and how can we bring all of these stakeholders together when we are addressing heat? So those are the critical aspects. It's C40. So just quickly, I just want to add one thing is that, we are working with on Cool Cities Network, where we have 30 cities coming together to, talk about urban heat island and other mechanisms. Cool Coalition are such platforms. So I think peer-to-peer city learning will become key. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing with us your experiences and different insights from the region. Also, thank you for bringing forward some of the things that are needed, some of the challenges that are still there. And this is maybe where I would like to move forward with our conversation towards. And I would like to go back to Mr. Ahmad bin Shafar and ask him, with your experience, with what you heard in the discussion today, what advice would you give leaders that are trying now to step up their own action and beat the rising heat with strategy that can keep people cool, especially with a consideration of the fact that COP27 and COP28 will be in this region? So any recommendation?
Definitely, I strongly believe to push everybody toward the district cooling. And this concept is really would save a lot of money, and it will save to the end user. Plus, it will help to protect our environment, since it's one of the main pillars of the green initiatives. Number two, we have to test, excuse me, we have to make sure that we have, when we apply the district cooling, we applied it on the right place. Affordability. People can pay the cost of district cooling. Number two, we tested commercially. Is this a viable solution? For example, with all respect to all nationality, I cannot take a Rolls Royce and sell it in Africa. There's no buyers, right? So let's be frank with the life. I mean, we have to be very pragmatic. We have to sell the solution on the right place. So when you take it to the new cities, to the new developments. We cannot go to old Dubai, the old city of Dubai, and use the district cooling due to lack of infrastructure there. What I mean, there is no enough corridors to lay the pipe for district cooling. There is no space to build the plant rooms. So basically, we have to start with the new cities. We should not look at yesterday, we look at tomorrow. The concentration, how we will grow the concept on the right place, on the right way. This is all what I can say.
Thank you very much. Very concise, but absolutely to the point, which is what we need, because we are in a hurry to implement the solutions, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So thank you. And I think this point on affordability is essential, not only for what you were saying, exactly this idea that you need to use the solutions that are fit for purpose in the place, but also because we were talking about energy security early and energy access. And obviously it needs to be all the communities, even the vulnerable parts, need to be able to afford the cooling that we need. So thank you very much for your very insightful contribution on this. And maybe I would like to ask the same question now to Philip Garrett, and to see, we heard the plea for additional resources that are needed and cities that are still struggling from our colleague from C40. So what do you recommend? What type of advice would you give leaders and also other financial institutions, of course, in the run-up to COP27 and COP28, but in general, at large, in this very delicate phase?
Yes, thank you very much. So, I mean, I think a few areas that we need to focus on as standards. Building standards are critical. And I mean, it's so sad to see, houses being built still just with a single wall. And my apartment in Abidjan, where I live, I have a single wall and the sun shines on it and it's like a radiator at night. And, how can you pit your air conditioner against the force of the sun? There's only one winner there. So, we need to have building standards. We need to have energy efficiency standards for air conditioners, and it's great to have the tax incentives to encourage people to buy the energy efficiency ones, but frankly, we shouldn't put the inefficient ones on the market in the first instance so that people just can't make that choice. It would be great if we can design new cities to absorb district cooling, but we still have to deal with the old cities where many people live. I think if we're not careful, we will see an explosion of energy consumption associated with cooling. And if that energy doesn't come from renewable energy, then we will see an increase in emissions, and it just makes the problem worse. I talked about the importance of cold chain for food security. This is going to become more and more important. If we lose more food, then it's going to create stress and all kinds of negative impacts. And I think finally, we also need to focus on nature-based solutions, because nobody will speak up for biodiversity. But if we lose that biodiversity because of increased temperature, then we lose, well, we don't know what we're losing because we don't know what exists within the biodiversity. So it's really important that we get some of those systems in place. Thank you.
Thank you very much for also bringing up again the importance of biodiversity, but also for underlying the part around the building standards and how we need to really also get our numbers together. This is also something that was referred to make informed policy, data-driven decision making. So absolutely essential. And since we talked about standards, and this is something that our colleague Sausan mentioned earlier, maybe I'd like to go back to you, Ms. Bawaresh, to ask you what is your advice that you would like to give to leaders in terms of what needs to be done?
I think that the key word is commitment, setting the goals. And if we even develop the best plans in the world, but we don't have the commitment, we will not be able to achieve the results and create change. So we need to understand what are the drivers for commitment. And this can be only done by understanding the finance, the technology, and the policy needs. And I think that we should look at the sustainable development goals, that they are connected, not separated. Just sharing one of the initiatives, the Royal Initiative in Jordan, it's for providing air conditioning and heating for schools. And the impact of this initiative, that even in schools, it affected the sustainable education. It was not just about climate change or energy efficiency. It even enhanced the students' lives, and they had less absent days, higher scores. So we need to look at all SDGs in a connected way, and the world should believe that local resilience leads to global resilience. And we need to learn from COVID-19 and what happened, that we need all to work together. And technology is, as you mentioned, is very important and key. Imagine COVID-19 before 30 years. What would happen to education? What would happen to work? How are we going to work from home? And so on. So technology comes first. And we need to create a learning environment, and this can only be done by involvement, because everybody knows the saying, tell me and I will forget, show me and I might remember, involve me and I will learn. So these are my advice, that we need to cooperate on all levels in order to create change.
Thank you very much. I think your point is absolutely important. This part on engagement and living the solutions that we are implementing, and implementing them all together so that we can see a shared vision unfolding in front of our eyes is indeed essential. And this also, you refer to this integrated approach that is needed, this bird eye view that we need to have on the development around policy, around technology, around different needs, around finance, so that we can tackle this as a way to bring forward our sustainable urban development and implementing our sustainable development goals. And going back to engagement, maybe I would like to ask again the same question, your recommendation in terms of what would you like to communicate to our leaders on the way to COP27, COP28, but even in general for our future. So Omnia, would you like to share your thoughts with us?
Yes, and first I would like to emphasize what Garrett has mentioned when it comes to research. And this is one way that policymakers can engage, especially with young people, because as young people, we are first line when it comes to working with our community. We're able to access and to understand their perceptions, their needs, and to get the numbers from a very one-to-one perspective. And this presents a good argument whenever we are developing policy asks or policy recommendations, because they are based on data and they are more action-oriented to have the impact that we need. As we are going to COP27, as well as having COP28 also in UAE in our region, this presents a unique opportunity, especially for civil society, for young leaders, to really work closely and because before that, normally it was very challenging for young climate advocates to go to conferences like that, because in our region specifically, it's very far away, it's costly and so on. But now we have the opportunity to attend these conferences, to not just be there at the negotiations, but network with different stakeholders, plan events together, plan forums together where young people can express their needs, their innovative ideas, their creativity, together with investors, together with different stakeholders. It's also important to highlight that as young people, we need to have the support, either if it's financial when it comes to investing in innovative solutions developed by young people, or by having expert support, learning from mentors, learning from success stories, being in boards and being able to say our inputs and having it implemented. And at the same time, getting that opportunity from a young age will help us more supporting the work that's already been done to really combat and be part of the solution when it comes to specifically adapting to the increasing heat temperature and reducing the carbon emissions to mitigate the increasing temperatures.
Thank you very much. So quite encouraging message of truly tapping the potential that we have ahead of us and to focus on solutions and the way that we can bring them together by also benefiting from this platform and the opportunity to talk to others. So we are almost close at the very end. We have 5 minutes left for our conversation. I know we could have gone on and speaking for hours about this very important topic. I would like maybe to go back to the first of our speaker as a last of our remarks and ask Mr. Taiba also for his opinion on recommendations that we would like to share or insights that we would like to share with our leaders towards COP27 and COP28.
Okay, very briefly, I would go back again to the technology, which I think everybody touched on. Technology is the way out, but I want to be more specific now into very specific subject. It was very clear that we spend 70% of our produced energy into air conditioning. Now, I know that there are some technologies today, maybe not up to scale, but using solar to go to air conditioning directly through what's called adsorption process. That thing is, in my view, if we have the right focus from the whole world, to go from solar heating into directly cooling without passing through electricity, you would be cutting almost 70 or 80% of the power going to refrigeration. This is going to be a game changer for the whole world. But I don't think that there is enough focus from the whole world into this. Simple technology, I'm not simple, but technology, but it needs the right resources to do so. So if I want to leave COP27 and COP28 with an idea, I think this is my idea. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Then if I get you think that one of the key ingredients is technology, I would say. Can I ask also the other panelists here with me to think about one ingredient, one word that you think will be helpful for us to bring this forward? I don't know who wants to be the courageous one and start.
I think finance is very important.
Finance?
Yes, because as you know, we put in national energy action plans, we put projects, we put targets and so on. But without the availability of finance, unfortunately, it will still be an obstacle. So we need to look at finance as a key also. You know, policy, finance and technology all work together.
Thank you.
As I say, you need to have all the drivers, to work on the drivers in order to gain the commitment.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I don't know, please.
I think one thing is just to answer this idea is the financing. In Dubai, we commercialize it. We sold the concept. I'm ex-banker, I'm not engineer. I've learned this, how to sell the concept of district cooling to the banks to finance it and to structure it on a long term. This is very important. It's not to escalate the rate. It's not to add extra charges. How to build it in a very efficient way, how to build it, how to scale it up, how to reach to that level. A lot of cities, a lot of countries facing problem because they don't know how to ramp up the loads or how to build this infrastructure around the district cooling. Where we are here in Dubai, we are purely commercial, government entity running on a very commercial way. And by the way, we are going for IPO toward the end of the year. So the company will be public if you want to buy share. So basically, it's commercial concept. So how to do it? It's to convince bank to accept and to adopt the concept of district cooling. And that's what we have seen in Qatar also. Saudi Arabia also has done that. You will see now recently the people are accepting to finance a district cooling platform. It's like the turbines, like the generation and electricity, water desalination, same thing.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
So we have to open this dialogue between technology, solution, finance, and let's open it right now. So maybe I go to Mr. Phillips.
Yes, I think if I have to choose between technology and finance, then under the assumption that technology, it comes up with more resource efficient solutions and reduces the cost, then we need the technology so that we can make the finance go further, because there's a big squeeze on finance. Everybody's looking for it.
Thank you very much. And of course, last but not the least, what is your suggestion, your ingredient, Omnia?
I would say urgency to utilize both technology and finance for climate change solutions, especially when it comes to beating the rising heat.
And unfortunately, it's not only the implementation of the solution that is very urgent and that we really need to come as close as possible to, but also we need to come as close as possible to the end of our session. As I said, I think it's been a great pleasure for me to be able to moderate this panel. We have heard from our speakers both here and of course online, different ways of providing solution, but also the ambition and the incredible efforts, both the private, the public sector, but also the entire ecosystem community and investment community as well is bringing forward to develop these very needed and very important solutions that we need to cool our planet as quickly as possible, and really repeating that we need an integrated approach and all hands on deck in order to deliver these very important solutions. So we heard our national and local governments need to define the comprehensive strategy, link them together, support action, leverage opportunity that are already existing with the support of the communities they represent, of course. We heard the great role that the private sector has to play in delivering these different sustainable technologies that can really bring cooling at the pace and the affordability that it's of course needed. And then finally, the role of research and finance institution in supporting, implementing and empowering these different efforts, and the importance that also delivering data and support around access of resources still has in meeting some of the challenges that our cities and local governments are facing. So I would like to conclude just mentioning a few, I wouldn't say homework, but a few opportunities for all of you, and mention the role the platforms such as the Cool Coalition, but also the Global Alliance for Building and Construction have in creating spaces where we can bring together all of these different stakeholders and support local governments and governments in delivering comprehensive approaches. So I want to point you to one key resource, Beating the Heat, a sustainable cooling handbook for cities. This was launched at COP26 by the Cool Coalition in collaboration with UNEP, with the GCOM, RMI and WWF, and the Mission Innovation and the Clean Cooling Collaborative. So a very interesting collection of proven solutions designed to help cities, sustainable urban cooling for all, and containing over 80 case studies and methodologies for action. So something definitely for all of you to be inspired by. We also would like to invite you to check out the work that the Global Coalition for Building and Construction is doing, in particular the importance that is being highlighted with the collaboration and the continuous effort the countries need to put forward in engaging and settling enabling framework for cities and for businesses in order to have NDCs that are conductive of positive building codes that can be utilized also to further the type of solutions that we need. And of course, cooling is an essential and integral part when it comes to delivering efficient building solutions. So with this plea, we also would like to invite you to check the Global Coalition for Building and Construction Alliance website and to look into the many different roadmaps that have been developed for different parts of the world. They present a comprehensive approach to emission reduction, including not only recommendation and inspirational and short ideas on how to set longer and shorter term targets, but also giving you ideas around timelines and around different type of solutions, including recommendation on urban planning, new buildings, existing building operation, and of course also around materials and resilience of clean energy systems. So a lot of information, a lot of inspiration coming from all over the world within this roadmap. And I will conclude just pointing one roadmap that is upcoming by the Global Alliance for Building and Construction. It's been developed by the United Arab Emirates Ministry and for Infrastructure, and which has been leading in the past period in developing a sub-regional roadmap for 22 Arab states based on the existing global ABC roadmaps and highlighting key action in these 8 areas that I have already mentioned, including policy for building and city, different building codes and financing opportunities. So I invite you to also look at these wonderful resources, and finally to join me please in a big round of applause for all of our speakers and panelists, both in person and online. And finally, of course, a huge thank you to the organizers and in particular to UNEP, C40 Cities, Cool Coalition and Global Alliance for Building and Construction. Thank you for being with us and looking forward to continue the conversation with all of you. Have a wonderful continuation of your day.
Thank you.